the tarot as a little light, like a torch, shining a light on places that we can't see with our human eyes, or we are not able to understand. So it gives me another perspective.
So it's your way of communicating with the universe.
Yes, with my higher self.
With your higher self, with your divine self. Yes.
I feel like it's all still here. The universe is us. I just ask for clarity.
It would be a good thing to introduce everyone to the science behind astrology and tarot, how it all works, and to have all your questions answered. I have with me here today Shobana Cooke. She's based in Sri Lanka, in Colombo. She does Vedic astrology. She's a tarot card reader. She's a homeopathic consultant. She's a hatha yoga instructor. And she also is a yogic lifestyle counselor. So tell me, how does astrology work? And how does the position of the stars and the planets when you're born affect you for the rest of your life?
This is a big question that everyone's fascinated about, sometimes a little contentious, because it also, in some spiritual faiths, this over-reliance on astrology that we consider as a map, sometimes an obstacle along some people's faith paths. For me, how I see it is that it's a snapshot of all the different 9 Navagraha energies available to us when we came into this body and this journey. For me, it's more than, it's not about the fortune telling element of it, but for me, it's a hugely important self-learning tool about knowing who we are, what is this soul journey and what is this body. And I find it gives me a map. It gives me a guideline about, where am I needed? What am I good at? What do I need to be careful of? Who can I run with? Who do I need to sit down with more and be careful with? So for me, it's a map. I feel like we are blessed to have this knowledge and to be able to navigate, because I believe we still have free will. We have choice. Even though there are certain planetary influences that will have a huge impact on our lives, we still have choice. In this human life, we have an intellect and we're able to decide, left turn or right turn. I wouldn't be locked by it. I just want to be guided. What I love about astrology is that it gives me that structure, but it also shows me, where I have free will. And then when I bring in tarot, which I think anyone and everyone should get a pack, because there's so much wisdom and so much you can learn from these little quick readings.
So will you explain to everyone how tarot works and how that's different from how astrology works?
Tarot pack has 78 cards. It has 22 main cards, which I would say could be compared to the different tattvas like we talk about in astrology and in the Vedas. Those are universal to all living souls, to all the consciousness. The other cards are much more the characters, situations, but 22 are eternal. For you, for me, it's universal. So the tarot combines our soul universal journey along with these mundane choices we have to make. So I've got my pack of cards here because what I really would like is for everyone to be inspired enough to go out and pick up a pack of tarot cards. So this is a pack that I really like. They're a little bit old and used. So what I would encourage you on a regular basis to kind of just touch base, like where am I at? Like you shuffle the cards, you mainly touch with your left hand because it's closest to your heart. And then when you feel like you've shuffled enough, you cut it. I'm not so tech savvy that I can do cameras all over. So you cut it into 3 piles and then you run your hand over the piles. Sometimes the question may vary. Like, I have a big day today. What is my message? What do I need to remind myself of? And then I break the pile. So I kind of do this and I spread it out.
Okay.
Pick one card, whatever comes.
Okay.
quick little interpretation. My hands are tied. I can't quite see clearly. It's a small card. This is not one of the major arcana. So when you're doing your daily guidance, these little cards that are not the main major arcana 22 cards, they're big messages.
Okay, okay.
So if you have a difficult small card, it's a temporary thing. It might just be right now.
Okay.
Whereas when the major arcana have more powerful messages for us, we must really sit down and think about it.
What is sort of the energy behind the way you do the tarot? Do you set an intent and then expect that, an answer to that?
It's more open. So I sort of say a silent prayer within myself for my higher guidance.
Okay.
For whatever that message that I need to hear. If I'm reading for someone else, then I ask to be guided to help them in whatever they want light shed on. But I don't set an intention only because then it limits something. Okay. So I sort of open myself up to make me a channel, show me what I need to know. Of the tarot as a little light, like a torch, shining a light on places that we can't see with our human eyes or we are not able to understand. So it gives me another perspective.
So it's your way of communicating with the universe.
Yes, with my higher self.
With your higher self, with your divine self, yes.
I feel like it's all still here. The universe is us.
Yes, yes.
So I just ask for clarity. And then I get into a conversation with the cards, saying, guide me, show me. Then the cards trigger a question or a thought or something like that. Then you can ask a question, like, think of it more like as a daily wisdom drop, because it's constantly trying to harmonize us from the human mundane world to our higher self.
Okay, very nice. And I know that you've spent a lot of time healing people. Tell me, how can one use tarot and astrology for healing purposes?
How I like to work my homeopathic practice also is that sometimes, just the homeopathic repertoire is enough. Somebody comes to you and they're very open and they start, they're aware of themselves, that they're sharing. So it's easy for us to repertorize. But sometimes someone comes with a chronic, migraine that they've had for years and they've tried lots of different things. And they're not so open to, they're not aware of the mind-body link, maybe. When we do something like a tarot reading, they can connect, visually they see cards that trigger something within them and speak to their subconscious mind, to those archetypes. Okay. And then might say, I see that this friend is kind of stressful for you. Has there been something going on? And then they would say, oh my gosh, yes, every time I go and see my friend, I might get this headache. So I find that the tarot it helps people talk. It kind of is part of more of a counseling, guidance, therapy tool. I find I often meet people when they're just going through a Saturn, their Lagna Erastaka, or they're just entered into a Saturn Dasa. And it's very funny because when I meet people for the first time for a first reading, more often than not, Saturn brings us to meet each other.
Wow, that's amazing.
And when I see that, I'm reminded to then just go through with them what is their personal sadhana. And I think, to me, that's one of the most important things. Is like, it doesn't have to be an elaborate practice, but what is your practice? How do you reflect? How do you take time out for yourself? So when we look at the different planetary influences and what it's asking us to do, when it's a Saturn time, it's really about learning the universal philosophies, the universal truths. It doesn't matter from which faith or from where in the world it is, but it's a time to learn truths, eternal truths. And then it's also about being humble. Saturn doesn't like egoistic students,
Tell me, Shobi, now I know you've been doing this for a few years. how much of a role does intuition play in it? And have you developed like a sense of intuition now that you've been looking at people's charts and at tarot cards?
Yes, I actually started reading cards when I was 15. From the homeopathy to the tarot to the astrology and even the yoga practice or the pranayama practice, I do tap into my intuition a lot. And I think that, you know, when people come to see wellness consultants, astrologers, whatever, sometimes they feel that the power is with the healer. One of the things I have felt really strongly over COVID was that it's given everyone an opportunity to really take things into their own hands. And suddenly we all got locked in all over the world. Everyone had to stay home. I really felt strongly for many years in my my clinical practice, that I had met souls and I had the time during that period to work with them, to teach them different things. And when we came into COVID, it was beautiful because I know that people I had come into contact with, like I'm sure so many other people who've worked with healers and astrologers and all these people, they had tools. It's almost like every family would then have a little lighthouse, you know, people who had access to another perspective.
I would love you to show people a little demonstration of what you want to leave them with, to try a tool or a technique that they can try on their own without feeling intimidated by a pack of cards.
I would like to teach you a little quick technique. So when you get this tarot pack that I recommend that you do, I want you to take out the 22 cards that have the names written at the top. The ones that have names like this, you know, the star, the fool, those are the major arcana. The little minor cards that only have a Roman number. So take those aside. And the ones that say the king, queen, knight, put those also aside and only take out the full name ones. Okay, that's your major arcana. I want you to shuffle them. Like we talked about earlier, holding the cards mainly in your left hand. While you shuffle the cards, just, you know, close your eyes, go into a quieter space within, you know, and just be aware of your breathing. Be aware of a very slow breathing and connect to the cards. Then I would cut into 3 piles. Trust intuition, trust wherever it's falling. If cards fall out in the shuffle, that's a message that you need to look at. So I wouldn't disregard that one. I would actually look at that card too. Run your hands over the cards and pick a card from your major arcana. Let's look at this full card for a moment. This is the beginning of a journey where we have to trust our faithful friend. On a whim, we set out. Our head is high up, but, you know, if you can see, there's mountains. So in another version of this card, you have to see that just like it's in the mountains, you might fall. So you have to be very careful where you step. But when you look at your card, spend a little bit of time, even if you don't know all this tarot jargon. You know, what does it say to you? How does yellow make you feel? Who is this character? Are you setting out on a journey? Are you the friend who's setting out someone else? So really try to put yourself as the character in the card. Even in the star card, put yourself into that location and then close your eyes and see what comes into your mind's eye. And that's where the little wisdom intuition drops are.
Okay.
It's not always, you know, so strict like from a book. And the book helps because it's an interpretation. Visuals speak to our subconscious mind. We think in pictures.
Yes.
Not in words. So when we look at certain pictures, illustrations, it opens up different parts of our memory.
So, and tell me, how accurate are modalities to you, like astrology and tarot? Are they very, very accurate?
Yes, I find them to be very accurate. I would only say it depends on how finely tuned your tools are. So my cards live in a silk cloth.
Right.
And I wrap it up. So once I have touch them and finish them, they're insulated.
Mm-hmm.
You don't let a lot of people handle them unless you guide them to. So
you're saying always wrap them in a silk cloth, the cards?
yes.
And of
From
course,
that,
astrology is a lot more complicated to learn, right? Because you have to, it's about
yes,
calculations.
it is. I would say the great starting point with astrology is your own chart. The resources are at our fingertips now. And at a time, I think humanity really needs that timeless knowledge. So if people are so inclined, there's lots of information out there.
But what advice do you want to leave people with that you want them to think about?
I think we have to each do our own fine-tuning within ourselves and sort of realign our heart centers to think of everyone. It's important for us to remember that after all this time of being stuck, we're coming out with Mars and with action. How are we going to step forward into this post-COVID world? I think it's an important one. I might live very differently to how I lived
before. Yes, yes. Yes, I, for one, my life, I think, totally changed. So I see what you're saying, yes.
And I see even for myself, so many changes took place by just waiting quietly within.
I love what you said about collective consciousness and opening our heart centers and sort of tuning ourselves to the vibration of more than just us. You know how people sometimes say, look at my chart, but don't tell me anything bad?
Yes.
How do you tackle something like that?
Because I don't see it as good or bad. I don't see good news and bad news. I see a soul on a journey, and there are some arduous treks and then there are some plateaus. So it's really about how you present to someone, because we have to walk through it. And I really feel strongly that difficult situations, what we deem difficult, are almost like portals for just accelerating our consciousness. And we mustn't be afraid of difficult, because that's what all these healers and counselors and the yoga teachers, and there's just all kinds of art therapists and everyone, our role is to be there to support the journey. And I think nobody's alone. We're all in this together. We're all on the same path. And I wouldn't look at it as good and bad. I would look at it at, where am I on the map? Really look at it as, who's my teacher? Depending on the dasa, that's the teacher in the room. And they're doling out certain lessons that only Saturn can or only Mercury can. I would remind people not to be passive listeners to their astrology being told, because we have to all be accountable now. We are in another time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And personal accountability, I think, is really important. Like we can't go on to say, oh, but I didn't know. I would even interview astrologers. Do I like them? Did I like them in my meeting with them, or read a little bit about them? Because it's a really big thing. You're trusting someone
to tell you about your soul's journey
into a very intimate part of yourself. If you don't like them, or you're afraid of them, or they're rude to you, or whatever it is, then maybe that's not the right person for the message.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. That was such a lovely talk. Thank you for listening to this chat. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to this page. Please subscribe to our podcast on Apple and Spotify, Wellness Curated, and follow us on Instagram, Wellness Curated, the number 1. Thank you.